Okay, so we left off where Jay Berry and his dad have dug the hole down in the bottom so that they can use the net, to catch the monkeys. This is chapter 7. By this time, I had the monkey catching fever so bad I didn't think I'd get any sleep at all that night. In fact, I couldn't see much use in even going to bed, but I must have been more tired than I thought I was. I fell asleep and didn't even dream about monkeys. It seemed like I had barely closed my eyes when I was awakened by Papa shaking me. "You'd better get up," Papa said. "It's almost daylight and those monkeys will be waking up." While I was putting on my clothes, I heard the rattling of pots and pans. I thought it was Papa messing around in the kitchen until I walked in and saw that it was Mama fixing breakfast. "Oh, Mama," I said as I poured water into the washpan, "you didn't have to get up this early. Why didn't you stay in bed and get your rest? I could have done without anything to eat till noon." "You can't hunt monkeys on an empty stomach," Mama said. "Besides, it doesn't look like I'll get any work out of you until you get over this monkey business." I finished eating breakfast long before Mama and Papa did, and I started getting my monkey catching gear together. I hurried to the cellar and got some more apples. Then I rushed to the barn for another gunny sack. Calling to Rowdy, I picked up my net and headed for the bottoms as fast as I could trot. I was about halfway through our fields when I met old Gandy waddling home. If he wasn't a mess! His feathers were all ruffled and he was smeared with mud from head to tail. He seemed to be dog-tired and wasn't moving any faster than a terrapin could walk. "Brother, Gandy," I said, looking him over, "you must have had a terrible night. It looks like these wild geese down on the river really worked you over." Keeping his eye on the net, Gandy honked his disgust and waddled over to one side as if he didn't care to have a thing to do with me. Rowdy could see that Gandy was just about all in, and he figured it was a good time to aggravate him a little. He bounded over and started barking at him, and for the very first time, Gandy refused to fight back. Honking and flapping his wings, he lit out for home. Rowdy was right after him, nipping at his tail feathers and having the time of his life. "Oh, come on, Rowdy," I said. "Leave the old fool alone. We've got more important things to do than mess with that old goose." It was almost sunup when I arrived at the hole Papa and I had dug. I opened my net and very carefully placed it on the ground with about a foot of the handle and the celluloid ring sticking over the rim of the hole. Then I started covering the handle, loop, and netting with dead leaves and grass. After everything had been completely covered, I placed 3 big apples in the center of the hidden loop and then backed off to one side to see what kind of a job I had done. I was very pleased with my net hiding skill. "Rowdy," I said, "I don't know much about trapping this way, but you'll have to admit one thing, that net sure is hidden." Even if old Rowdy couldn't understand some of the things I did, he always acted like he did anyway. He wagged his tail and seemed to be pleased with everything. Picking up my sack, I said, "Come on, boy, let's get in the hole and wait for those monkeys." With Rowdy behind me, we got down on our stomachs, squirmed back under the brush, and dropped down in the hole. Rowdy and I hadn't been in the hole 10 minutes when from somewhere in the bottoms an old woodpecker started banging away on a dead snag. This seemed to wake up everything in the bottoms. Birds started chirping and squirrels began chattering. From across the river, the big old bullfrog started drumming away. "Broom, broom." "Rowdy," I whispered, "if those monkeys are around, I don't think it'll be long now. Nothing could sleep with all that racket going on. I hope you're hungry and would like to have a few apples for breakfast. I hope they're hungry and would like to have a few apples for breakfast." When I first heard the noise, I couldn't make out what it was, although I knew that I had heard it before. It was a slow, scratchy, leaf-rattling noise. Then I noticed that the brush over the top of the hole started shaking. "Rowdy," I whispered, "something is messing around with the brush up there. You don't suppose it could be that smart monkey?" Then I saw what it was. It was a big, old, black snake as big around as my arm. There was no doubt but what he had just shed his skin because he was as black and shiny as a new stovepipe. On he came, sticking out his tongue and twisting his way through the brush. When he was directly over the top of the hole, he stopped and peered down to look at Rowdy and me. I thought, now wouldn't it be something if that snake decided to come down in this hole? things began happening to me. I got as cold all over as I did this time some mean boys threw me in a spring. My skin started crawling around on me. I stopped breathing, and my old heart went absolutely crazy. "Rowdy," I said in a low voice, "I know that old black snake isn't poison, but he's a snake. If he takes a notion to come down in this hole, everything in the bottoms will know that we're down here because I'll probably make a lot of racket." I wanted to run, but I couldn't. The only way out of that hole was right over the snake, and I never did like to run over snakes. Ordinarily, Rowdy wasn't scared of snakes. That is, if he was out where he could maneuver around a little. But he didn't seem to like the idea of sharing that hole with the snake any more than I did. He was whimpering and trying his best to crawl under me. In desperation, I picked up a handful of dirt and threw it in the snake's face. This scared him. He reared his head back, stuck his tongue out at me about 1,000 times, then slithered on through the brush and disappeared. Letting out a lot of air that had long since grown stale, I breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Rowdy, that was close, wasn't it? For a second there, I sure thought we'd have to let that snake have this hole." The next visitor we had came awfully close to messing up everything. It was a big old hornet. He came buzzing around in the brush and then dropped down in the hole. Gritting my teeth, I closed my eyes, held my breath, and tried to sit still as a knot on a bur oak tree. I didn't know why I was holding my breath, because I knew that old saying of how you could hold your breath and nothing would sting you. It was pure hogwash. I had tried that before, and it hadn't worked at all. Rowdy would have absolutely nothing to do with anything that had wings and a stinger. I had taken him on several wasp fighting expeditions, and the little red warriors had really worked him over. He knew all too well that you couldn't hide from them, and it was impossible to outrun them. I had to hold on to his collar and squeeze him up tight to keep him from having a runaway. The hornet buzzed all around us. I just knew that he was looking me over for a good soft spot to jab his stinger in. Finally, after what seemed like hours, he must have decided that there wasn't anything in the hole worth stinging, and he buzzed away. Wiping the sweat from my brow, I said, "Rowdy, I've sure learned one thing today. If you want to get everything in these bottoms interested, just dig a hole. That's all you have to do. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if a skeleton didn't come jiggling around next." Everything went all right for the next 30 minutes, and then I began to have those old doubts again. Maybe Papa was right. Maybe those monkeys had left the country. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I was that my monkey catching days had come to an end. I had just about decided to give up and go home when all at once I heard that $100 monkey squall. I perked up like our old hens did when a chicken hawk came flying around. "Did you hear that, Rowdy?" I whispered. "It was that $100 monkey. We're still in business." I raised up to where I could peek through the brush and started looking for monkeys. At first, I couldn't see a thing. Then I saw one. He was a little brown monkey, and he was sitting on a stump about 30 feet away. I was keeping my eyes on him when that big monkey let out another squall. From down in the hole, I couldn't tell where he was, but I knew that he was close by. Peering up through the brush, I saw him. He was sitting on a low limb of the bur oak tree directly above my net, looking down at the apples. I could tell by the big monkey's actions that apples were just what he wanted for breakfast, but he couldn't seem to convince himself that everything was all right. He stood up on his short legs and started looking things over. Once he looked straight at my hiding place, and I all but crawled down in my skin. "Rowdy," I whispered. "He's looking for us, but I think we've got him fooled this time." As if he had finally made up his mind, the big monkey squalled again and started moving backward and forward on the limb, all the time uttering those deep grunts. "Rowdy," I whispered. "He's talking to those little monkeys. I know he is because he did the same thing before. I wonder what he's saying to them this time." The big monkey must have been telling the little monkeys that everything looked all right to him, because here they came. A whole bunch of them dropped down from the branches and started grabbing apples. I couldn't see my net for all the monkeys. They were standing all over it. Very gently, I took hold of the handle with my left hand and caught hold of the blue ring with my right hand. Using the rim of the hole for leverage, I jerked down on the handle and yanked the blue ring. Just as I pulled the ring, I heard the big monkey let out a warning cry, but it was too late. The net had already closed. I couldn't see too well through the brush, but I can tell you that I had caught something, for the handle of the net was jerking in my hand more than it did when I had caught old Gandy. When the net flipped up out of the leaves and grass, it scared the monkeys half to death. Screeching and chattering, they scattered in all directions and disappeared in the timber. Rowdy and I threw brush all over the bottoms when we came boiling up out of the hole. My eyes all but popped out of my head when I saw that I had caught 2 little monkeys in my net. I was so pleased I whooped like a possum hunter whooping to his dog. "I got him, Rowdy!" I shouted. "I got 2 of them, look at them!" Rowdy was just as pleased as I was. Wagging his long tail, he ran over and started barking and growling at the monkeys. The monkeys were so cute, and I was so happy that I had finally caught one, I couldn't keep my hands off of them. I wanted to touch one. Working the handle back through my hands until the net was close to me, I poked a finger through the mesh and tickled one in the ribs. I wouldn't have been more surprised if I had stuck my finger in the firebox of Mama's cooking stove. The monkey squeaked and sank his teeth into my finger. I dropped the net and did a little squalling myself. Slinging my hand and doing a jig dance, I shouted, "You bit me! What'd you do that for? I wasn't going to hurt you." Rowdy had seen the monkey bite me, and he got really mad. He darted in, grabbed one of the monkeys, net and all, in his mouth, and started shaking it. "No, Rowdy, no!" I yelled. "Don't hurt that monkey!" I yelled too late. It seemed the monkey had just turned over in his skin and sank his needle-sharp teeth right in the end of Rowdy's nose. Rowdy wouldn't have turned loose a bumblebee any faster than he did that monkey. He bawled and jumped back so fast he almost fell over backwards. Sitting down on his rear, he looked at me and started whimpering. "Well, don't look at me," I said. "I can't help you. I got bit too." It was then that I realized I had a problem. How was I going to get those monkeys out of the net into my sack? "Rowdy," I said, "for all the good this sack is doing us, we may as well have left it at home. I can't get my hands close to those monkeys. They're going to eat me up." I decided that I'd just take the monkeys, net and all, to the house, and maybe Daisy and Mama could help me figure out something. Holding the net out in front of me as if I were carrying a couple of poison snakes, I started for home. I hadn't gone 100 yards when the unexpected happened. That $100 monkey dropped down from a sycamore tree and landed smack in the center of the game trail I was walking on. Rowdy and I wouldn't have stopped more suddenly if we had run face into a white oak tree. Standing on his short, stubby legs and waving his long arms in the air, the big monkey started squalling. He lay down on the ground and rolled over and over. Every little while, he would jump up and rush straight at me, showing his teeth and uttering those deep grunts. He squalled and he screamed. Then he began picking up sticks and chunks and throwing them at me. Usually, when I got scared, I could almost outrun my shadow, but I was beyond being scared. I was paralyzed. All I could do was stand there like I was in a trance, holding onto my net and staring at that big monkey. Rowdy was between the monkey and me. Every hair on his back was standing straight up. He was growling way down deep and showing his teeth to that monkey. A full minute went by before it dawned on me that I was still in one piece. When I realized this, I began noticing things. Every time the big monkey ran at me, he only came a little way. Then he would turn and shuffle back. He was bluffing. I was so sure of it that I got a little of my courage back, but not very much. "Rowdy," I said in a croaking voice, "don't jump on that monkey. I don't think he means to harm us. I think he's bluffing, or at least I hope he is." On hearing my voice, the big monkey went all to pieces. He squalled, and here he came shuffling along the ground with his big mouth open and grunting. He came close enough this time to grab the metal loop of my net and start jerking on it. Every time the big monkey jerked the net his way, I would jerk it back my way. We played tug-of-war for a few seconds. Then he turned his end loose and ran back down the trail a little ways. He lay down in the dirt and started squalling and screaming and cutting all kinds of capers. I thought he was having a fit. All the time this was going on, I had the feeling that the big monkey was trying to tell me something. I tried hard to figure out what it was, but I was so scared I couldn't. Just then, here he came again, scooting along on the game trail, screaming and making enough racket to scare a goblin to death. He grabbed my net and started jerking on it again. It was the same thing all over. We had another jerking session. Again, the big monkey turned his end of the net loose, ran back down the trail, lay down, and had another rollin', squealin' fit. As I stood there holding onto my net and watching that monkey throw a tantrum, I figured out what it was that he was trying to tell me. He was telling me to turn those little monkeys loose. "Rowdy," I said, "I believe that silly monkey wants me to turn these little ones loose, but he can just keep on wanting. After all I've gone through to catch them, there'll be whiskers on the moon before I let them go. Well, I'll fight him all over these bottoms." All at once, the big monkey stopped squalling, and the bottoms got as still as a graveyard. In the silence, an uneasy feeling came over me. Great big drops of sweat popped out on me. I could almost taste the tension. Never taking my eyes from that big monkey, I said in a low voice, "Rowdy, I don't like this one bit. I have a feeling that something is going to happen." I had no more than gotten the words out of my mouth when something did happen. Another monkey dropped down out of nowhere and lit on the ground not over 10 feet from me, not making a sound. It just stood there and stared at me. I was having an eyeball fight with that monkey when another one came from somewhere and plopped himself down on the other side of me. The first thing I knew, there was a complete circle of monkeys all around Rowdy and me. They started walking around us stiff-legged with their tails standing straight up and looking at us sideways. "Rowdy," I said, "I believe these monkeys are up to something. You've been wanting to jump on them, and from the looks of things, I think you're going to get your chance." Old Rowdy wasn't scared. He kept looking at me and waiting for the "get 'em" sign. I couldn't stand it any longer. Something had to be done. I jerked off my old straw hat, threw it at one of the monkeys, and shouted, "You get away from here! Get now!" I may as well have been telling Sally Gooden not to jump over the pasture fence. The monkeys didn't even act like they had heard what I said. They just kept circling around and around and around. I could see that the circle was getting smaller and smaller. I almost unscrewed my head from my neck following those circling monkeys with my eyes. "Rowdy, we've got to do something. We can't just stand here and let these monkeys play ring around the rosy with us." Just then, that $100 monkey started grunting that monkey talk again. The little monkeys must have understood what he was saying, for they stopped circling us. They just stood there on their spindly legs, staring straight at Rowdy and me, with no expression at all on their silly little faces. This was too much for me. Every nerve in my body was twanging like the E string on a fiddler's fiddle. I was trying to figure out which way to run when it happened. A small monkey with a long, skinny tail dropped down from a branch directly above me and landed right on top of my head. He grabbed a wad of my hair in all four of his tiny paws. Then he leaned over and took hold of my right ear with his teeth. I dropped my net and squealed at the same time, shouting, "Get him, Rowdy!" I reached up with both hands, grabbed that monkey by the tail, and started pulling. It was like pulling on the rubbers of my bean shooter. The harder I pulled, the longer that monkey seemed to get. I learned something right then. The long, skinny tail of a monkey is the best thing in the world to get a good handhold on. Closing my eyes and gritting my teeth, I gave a hard jerk on the monkey's tail. Along with a lot of my hair and skin, he came loose. I was never so mad in all my life. I still had a good hold on the monkey's tail, and before he could turn around and bite my hand, I started turning in a circle as fast as I could. About halfway in the middle of the third turn, I let loose. He sailed out over the bottoms like a flying squirrel and lit in the top of a good-sized bush. The little monkey didn't seem to be hurt at all. He let out a squeak and hopped down to the ground. For a second, he stood on his hind legs and showed his needle-sharp teeth. Then here he came again, straight at me, ready for some more fighting. He hadn't taken over 3 steps when all at once he fell over backwards. He got to his feet again, took a few more steps, and this time he fell flat on his face. He was so dizzy from the whirlwind I had put him through he couldn't seem to do anything. This tickled me. I yelled, "How do you like that, you little devil? If you jump on my head again, I'll sling you clear into Arkansas." My fight with the monkey had taken only a few seconds. During that time, I had been so busy I had completely forgotten about old Rowdy. On hearing a loud bellow from him, I turned to see how he was making out. Boy, did I ever get a surprise. I saw right away that Rowdy had made a terrible mistake. He was having the fight of his life. He usually enjoyed a good fight, but from the looks and the sounds of it, I don't think he was enjoying this fight very much. He didn't seem to be making any headway at all. Rowdy was built just right for good monkey biting, and the monkeys had sure taken advantage of this. It looked like every square inch of his hide had a monkey glued to it. His long legs and tail were covered with monkeys. Two of the little devils were sitting right on the top of his head, holding on with all four paws, and they had their teeth clamped onto his soft, tender ears. More monkeys were lined up on his back like snowbirds on a fence, biting, clawing, and squealing. His hair was really flying. The monkeys were so quick, Rowdy couldn't get a hold of them. Every time he snapped at one, he would wind up with a mouthful of air and no monkey. I saw right away that if I didn't do something, the monkeys were surely going to have a hound dog for breakfast. Looking around for a good whipping stick, I spied one about 10 feet away and darted over to get it. The monkeys must have realized what I intended to do, for just as I stooped over to get the stick, a little monkey flew in from somewhere and landed right in the middle of my back. I forgot all about the stick and was trying to reach around behind me and get hold of the monkey's tail when another one darted in and latched onto my leg. I was trying to get a hold of that one when another one came squeaking in and bit me on the hand. In a matter of seconds, I had monkeys all over me. They were biting, clawing, scratching, and squealing. I was hopping all over the place and making more racket than a tomcat with his tail caught in a mousetrap. Just when things were looking really bad for Rowdy and me, from high in the bur oak tree, the big monkey let out a few grunts and a loud squall. He must have been telling the little monkeys not to eat us up completely, to save a little for the next time, because they turned us loose and disappeared in the underbrush. Everything had happened so fast, it left me and Rowdy in a daze. I could hardly believe it. One minute we were fighting monkeys all over the place, and the next minute there wasn't a monkey in sight. We just stood there in the silence about 20 feet apart, looking at each other.